what I wanted to say was a pattern that has 20 stitches to 4 inches gauge in the stitch pattern, so it's not exactly what you would normally use. You can use a huge range of yarns. You can use the fingering weights that they recommended up to probably close to a worsted weight. A worsted weight's going to be very much stiffer, much more structured of a garment, but you can absolutely do it. Usually when people email me and ask me if they can do something like that in a pattern, my first reaction is watch out for row gauge, because often what you're doing is when you're using the same yarn for a certain stitch gauge, you're going to vary a lot in your row gauge. So your fingering weight may be here, but your worsted weight may be there. And so you'll end up with a completely different length of your garment. But in this case, it doesn't matter. And here's what I want you to look at in patterns to see if that's going to matter or not. In this pattern, you start from the bottom up, and I'm not giving anything away. You start from the bottom up, and then this length, so from the bottom to the underarm, is given in inches, not in rows. So whatever row gauge you have, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many of these little kind of boxes or ridges, however you want to look at it, it took you to get from here to here. It could take you 20, it could take you 40, but it doesn't matter because you're knitting to a length. So it's a number of inches. So that means your row gauge doesn't matter in that measurement. It'll matter a tiny bit in this shaping section. So there's an armhole shaping section right here, and there's also an armhole, there's a neck shaping section right there. But this length from here to here, or from here to here, is also measured in inches. And your distance from here to when you start doing this bind off row is also measured in inches and not in rows. So in any of those sections, this big body section, the section from your underarm to your neck, or from your neck up to your top of your shoulder here, they're all measured in inches. So you can use any row gauge, really any row gauge that gets you the stitch gauge you need to knit that length, because it's all given in the inches that you need and not like 30 rows or 46 rows or 1 row or 67 rows, whatever it is. It's not in rows, it's in inches. So you have some sections that are in rows, like there's a certain number of rows of shaping there, there's a certain number of rows of shaping there. But if you add up from bottom to top, this measurement, and this measurement, it's giving you all of the inches that you need. So honestly, you could knit this in anything from, really if you wanted to, a lace weight through probably a worsted weight yarn and get a vest that fits you properly, because you're doing those lengths by inches. And the other thing is that allows you also to adjust. So I'm a tall person, so I added length. I added length here. Now I'm not remembering if I added much length. I might have added a little length even here between armpit and neck. But I also wanted my neck to be a little bit lower than is in the pattern, because you do add some ribbing here. So I actually added some additional length right up here, probably an inch or two. So you can do those kinds of adjustments when your directions include those inch marks as you go. So that's something where you can absolutely use a different yarn for the same project and just follow the inches and come out perfectly fine. One place, a different kind of project that is not maybe like that, is a shawl like this. This is a shawl I made quite a long time ago, maybe 5 years ago, that is all in rows. So because it's all these, it's spine increases, and this is in Lettlopi. This is 4 colors of Lettlopi. Excuse my kind of overlapping color change yarn there. Maybe I'll have you look at this side. These are all colors of Lettlopi, and I don't remember what colors they are, but I could probably figure it out. But because you're doing the increases along the spine, you are doing the same number of rows no matter what your row gauge is. So while this is fine as a shawl, it is pretty short. It's like, it doesn't quite, it's like, it ends up really tight, which is not what the pattern really is, and it's not really what I was going for either. So that's a sort of pattern that is written out all rows with no inches. That is a lot harder to adjust. You can do the math and adjust for your row gauge, but it's not as simple as just knitting to the number of inches. So that's all that I wanted to talk about. Sorry if I've been yammering on about something that you already know, but it's something that I think people want to know when they try to sub yarns from patterns and say, I got the stitch gauge, like, am I good to go? And some patterns yes, and some patterns no. Things like this hat, again, is knit in length. You know, it was like cast on here, knit ribbing forever to a certain number of inches, because this is folded, right? So it's from here all the way to the decreases. And you could do that with any row gauge because you know how long you need those inches to be. But if it's said to do 150 rows, then you would have to find your row gauge and do the math to figure it out, which would be simple on a hat. It's not as simple in something that has a lot of shaping like a garment. So that's again all I had to say. Happy knitting.